So most everyone is looking for some kind of spiritual connection, right? A connection with God, the Supreme Self, whatever you might call it, and your own personal belief system. And some people do it through meditation, through religion, some people through drugs, whatever it may be. And that's kind of what I want to talk about here, is my own personal journey towards spiritual understanding and insight, and what I've sort of learned along the way. One thing that I thought would be interesting to start with today is the idea of chanting, or music in the context of religion, the continual remembrance of God. And it's always been kind of strangely looked at, in our culture at least, this idea of chanting, because we probably most strongly associate it with the Hare Krishna movement. If you know anything about the Hare Krishna movement, they wear saffron robes, they shave their heads, and they go around chanting Hare Krishna all day long. And not just with them, but with other religions, especially Hinduism, and even religion in the West with church music and hymnals and all the rest of it. There's always been a very strong connection between music and chanting and religion. So what's really going on here? To me, what it seems like the goal is to unite the individual and their sense of self with that of God. Because as anyone who preaches the law of attraction or things like that would know, whatever you keep at the very forefront of your mind, you tend to attract and see in the world. Like they say, if you're thinking about a red sports car, you suddenly start seeing red sports cars all the time. Same thing with God. Once you realize that God is everywhere and omnipresent, you can open yourself up to that awareness and become more connected with that. When you have your mind centered on God, as anyone spiritual will tell you, your thoughts, your actions, as a result, almost immediately become more pure, more centered, more thoughtful. And it makes sense, right? Because, if you're continually trapped in this idea of the ego and all the things attached to your own limited sense of self, you are actually contracting your identity, and you're continually reinforcing that. Whereas if you identify with God and consciousness, you are continually expanding and taking everything in and becoming one with that. So whenever you are aligned in thought and in heart with the idea of God, which is, at the end of the day, a sense of formlessness and just pure energy, and is really beyond description, you can begin to tap into that, and you become more aligned with things like awe and just happiness and acting correctly and feeling at one with all that is. So that's why these various spiritual paths, especially in yoga with Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga, and even with the Buddha's Eightfold Path, they all emphasize devotion and thought of God, because you are aligning yourself with that, and you are trying to expedite your own enlightenment. God, or whatever noun you choose to put upon it, is something that is formless and ultimately beyond understanding, beyond our comprehension and our ability to formulate it in our own minds and think about it almost. But when you use different things like chanting or music or symbolic representations like Krishna itself is, then you allow yourself to move from form into formlessness and to tap into that awareness and that power that comes with it. So that's what I would challenge you to do in your own spiritual practice, is find something that you can identify with and continually remember, and keep coming back to that and remain aware of that as you go about your day, so that you are operating from that state of awareness rather than your own sense of self, which can be constricting almost. So for right now, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Socrates, who is perhaps the Western world's greatest guru. When one is always occupied with the cravings of desire and ambition, which he is eagerly striving to satisfy, all his thoughts must be mortal, and, as far as it is possible to become such, he must be mortal every whit, because he has made great his mortal part. But he who has been earnest in the love of knowledge and true wisdom, and has exercised his intellect more than any other part, must have thoughts immortal and divine. If he attains truth insofar as human nature is capable of sharing in immortality, he must be altogether immortal. And since he is ever cherishing the divine power and has duly honored the divinity within, you will be supremely happy.